Lookism is a prejudice or discrimination against people who are considered to be. However, gun originates from a family of. How creepy this manhwa can be sometimes. When I say sometimes, it's an understatement because hello, I'm Azabe. Before we begin, know that we'll go through a brief overview from the wiki, then my non-spoiler opinion followed by the spoilers, and the final conclusion with a rating. Enjoy watch. Park Hyung-seok, also known as Daniel Park, is an unpopular and bullied high school student who is looked down upon by his peers for his obesity. Harassed every day by the daring vents, he vents his anger verbally towards his mother and requests a school transfer, deciding to escape his problems and start anew. He moves to Seoul and plans to attend a new high school. However, a few nights before starting school, he receives a new body, tall, muscular, and handsome. When one body is in use, other falls asleep. They can switch bodies by waking up the dormant one. Lookism is a South Korean manhwa written and illustrated by Taejun Park. The manhwa was first published weekly on Never Webtoon in November 2014. The story revolves around a high school student who can switch between two bodies, one fat and ugly and the other fit and handsome. An anime adaptation by Studio Mir was globally released on Netflix in December 2022. Well, that's all that's written on the wiki about Lookism. Lookism. Sounds like a play on words, doesn't it? And if you think so, you are absolutely right, because Lookism is indeed a play on words. We'll discuss more about this throughout the video, both in the spoiler and non-spoiler section. Lookism is a manhwa that initially makes you think that's a typical high school manhwa, and if you think that, you're right, but only halfway. And if you're now wondering, okay Azabe, what exactly do you mean by that? What do you mean we're only right halfway? I'll give you the answer. Yes, Lookism is a manhwa about high school students, but the story, messages, and idea behind it are not just about high school students and their struggles, not even a little. It hits you from many angles, challenges you to think about the things you already have, your feelings, your preconceived ideas, always questioning, and many other life lessons it brings to the light, all combined with extremely intense and captivating struggles and fights, plus a lot of mysteries. But after this long short introduction, let's try to delve into more details about Lookism. Lookism is not just a story about fighting against social prejudice and discrimination, but also a deep exploration of identity and interpersonal relationships. At the center of the story is Daniel Park, a teenager with a troubled life story. And before we go into too much detail about the story, let's go back a bit to my statement at the beginning. Why do I say that Lookism is a play on words, and what is the purpose? And here I believe that many of you have already realized, both from the name and the previous statements as well as from the images presented on the screen, the fact that in this manhwa appearance, Lookism plays a very important role in satirizing the way most of us already jump to conclusion and judge a person just by the way they look, hence the name Lookism. And if you don't believe me, just do a quick search on Google for the term Lookism, and if you are too lazy to do that, don't worry, I'm just like you, so I understand. And here is the description. Lookism is a prejudice or discrimination against people who are considered psychically unattractive. And now that we have clarified that, let's move on to discussing some important parts of this manhwa. Well, let's get into one of the interesting parts of the manhwa, Lookism. In addition to those already mentioned, we know from the beginning that Daniel Park has, for some reason, the answer to which we don't have yet in this manhwa, which has 492 chapters at the moment I'm writing the script. Returning to the subject, the fact that Daniel has two bodies is extremely intriguing. As a small piece of information to motivate you to read this manhwa, we'll discover throughout the story that there is another character who, like Daniel, has two bodies. The way it works, it's exactly the same as Daniel's. When one body falls asleep, the other wakes up, and vice versa, of course. As for the name and appearance of this character, I will not reveal them now, but if you want to find out who it is, go and read Lookism. I'm sure you won't regret it. If we talked about action, let me give you some details, avoiding spoilers. More in the spoiler section. When I talk about fights and action, I don't mean just high school fights. Although most of the characters in those fights are high school students, the level of the fights and the level of power for some of them are at such a level that you can't just call them high school fights. For example, Gun Park, a guy who is no more than 20 years old. On the Wiki Phantom, his age is approximated to be between 19 and 20 years old, but the level of power he displays is at a completely different level, even compared to characters like members of Yakuza families or other Korean mafia families, not just Japanese. However, Gun has his origins in a Yakuza family, plus most obvious thing about Gun is his black eyes with 2 white dots. This indicates that he has Ultra Instinct active. You might wonder, okay Azabe, what's the point? Why is this so important? Don't tell me he transforms like Goku into a Super Saiyan now that he has Ultra Instinct. Well, no, he can't transform like Goku, but that Ultra Instinct, as in Dragon Ball Super, indicates that Gun has a superior sense of fighting and prediction attacks, as well as a total level of increased power, compared to when he don't have Ultra Instinct active. And the fascinating part is that he has that Ultra Instinct active non-stop. There is no moment when we can see him without it active. For him, Ultra Instinct being his natural form, which indicates, I say, quite a lot about Gun Park level of power. And now let's move on my favorite part, maybe yours too, the spoiler section. Spoiler warning, attention, the part where I discuss certain events from the manhwa follows, so there is a risk of getting spoilers, from small to extremely large ones. Pause the clip, go read if you haven't read Lookism, and come back here when you are done. However, if you don't mind spoilers or have finished reading, continue from here. I've warned you in case of anything. Gun Park is one of the key characters in Lookism, known for his charisma and impressive fighting skills. Originally from a Yakuza family, Gun is portrayed as a very strong and charismatic young man with a dominant presence throughout the series. For example, his fight with Daniel Park in The Handsome Body, when he accidentally gains Ultra Instinct for a few moments, but in a subconscious form and being more powerful than Gun's, at least from my point of view. We can see Gun with a crazy laugh on his face as he's happy to finally have a decent fight. And here you might say, Azabe, what do you mean by in subconscious form? Well, I mean that Daniel returns to his original body and the handsome body moves on its own, being almost in a berserk form where it attacks anything he sees. Another moment is when Daniel in his original body asks Gun to teach him how to fight in such a way that he won't end up being defeated. And Gun discovers that Daniel's talent when it comes to fights is that he can copy any move. Of course, more advanced techniques require a higher level of training, which he will receive from Gun. Of course, he is happy when he discovers this, because as he himself says, he finally will create his magnum opus, his most powerful creation in terms of fighting power and being a fighter without limits when it comes to evolution. However, there are extremely many mysteries about Gun, some still undisclosed in the manhwa. Daniel Park is the main character of the manhwa Lookism. He is a teenager who faces numerous challenges and difficulties in his life. Psychical, Daniel has 2 bodies, one considered unattractive and full of problems, and the other attractive and popular. This double identity makes him navigate between 2 completely different worlds, but often being the subject of prejudice and discrimination in both bodies. Practically, many times this manhwa shows us how the desire to be in someone else's shoes can be extremely wrong and hasty, since we don't know enough about that person's life and how they see the world. Let's give a few examples. Since we are in the spoiler section, let's start first with examples about Daniel. He is initially ridiculed, mocked and bullied just because he is fat and has a repulsive appearance to most people, plus the fact that he has no courage to take any initiative no matter what we are talking about. But even when he receives the handsome body, he encounters several situations throughout the story where we can see how the fact that he looks the way he does and his body is extremely optimal for fights brings him many misunderstandings and negative words. For example, the school bullies try to beat him up, but accidentally he defeats each one of them. Of course, there were just misunderstandings, and he was just trying to defend himself. Later, this attracts other fights and troubles to him, or the fact that although he looks good, there are people who talk behind his back and people who say the weirdest things about him, even though not a single thing is true. Or even the friends he makes along the way, both girls and boys, end up being ridiculed behind their backs, some taking stand against false rumors and some characters preferring to ignore them. In short, the author tries to show us that a different body doesn't necessarily mean a better life, especially since there are moments with stalkers where we see how creepy this manhwa can sometimes become, and the author's final lesson is to try to content with what you have and try, based on what you have, to improve and stop being jealous of those around you, but rather see them as your source of inspiration. For example, the fact that throughout the story, the ugly and fat body, the original body, doesn't remain permanently like that, but on the contrary, it slims down, and when it receives training from Gun in the original body, which is now slim and handsome, it also grows in height, and there are extremely many mysteries about Daniel, which even he tries to discover. For example, the fact that one of the characters who was friends with his father bears a striking resemblance to him in the original body. Even his grandmother calls him by the character's name, being even outraged, or the fact that he has two bodies, the only one who has the answer being one of Daniel's enemies, Charles Choi. And the hypotheses about these two things, as well as about other mysteries, are plentiful from the fans. Maybe if you are interested, we can even make some videos discussing the theories. The last discussion before the conclusion addresses how creepy this manhwa can sometimes be. When I say sometimes, it's an understatement, because the number of creepy situations is not small at all. For example, the moment we learn about a ghost story, and Zack, who is terrified of ghosts, wanting to seem like a big alpha male and cool, accepts the challenge to write his name on the board considered haunted. Only that in the board there is a woman with an extremely creepy face. However, in the end, Zack writes his name in a hurry and runs back to the group, only to later discover that what we saw was a window, not a board, the board being completely untouched and a little further from the window. But if that's not creepy enough, I can continue. For example, the scenes with stalkers, both for a girl in Daniel's group, but especially for Daniel's handsome body. The fact that the two stalkers look extremely inhuman, extremely unkempt and so on, but also the fact that they had an extremely dubious mentality and behavior makes the two situations extremely creepy. But I could continue and discuss both about mysteries and theories, as well as about characters that I could make an entire series just about Lookism, maybe in the future, but for now I want to keep this video as short as possible, so let's move on to the conclusion. In conclusion, after the discussions both with spoilers and without spoilers, Lookism is a manhwa that will definitely not give you time to get bored reading it due to its action, but also its creepy tense moments as well as its funny moments. I consider Lookism to be an extremely good manhwa, which I would recommend you to read. And since the manhwa at the moment is reaching the number of 500 chapters, I can only wish you happy reading, and don't forget to go outside and take some fresh air, not just to read non-stop until you catch up. And now, leaving the jokes aside, I guess you are waiting to know the grade I give to this manhwa. The grade I give is 8, and the reason why I can give this manhwa a 10 or a 9 are the following two. The first reason being that sometimes, despite the captivating story and the life lessons that this manhwa questions for you as a reader, sometimes explanations seem a little far-fetched to me. And the second reason is that sometimes in some fights there are so many twists that the meme from JoJo describes it the best. In short, some fights become a series of twists, which sometimes can be a little too predictable or frustrating. Because of these two reasons, I feel the need to deduct 2 points. But even so, I consider Lookism to be a manhwa worth reading, maybe even at the level that I consider that if you haven't read it, you should. So go and read Lookism. If you have other opinions and grades compared to mine, leave them in the comments. And if you want more of this type of videos, YouTube considers that you will like this clip, so give it a chance. I've been Asabe, I wish you happy reading, bye!